strange and the magical was very normal to me. And so, I was very drawn instinctively to magic. I would, perform little spells and rituals as a child, long before I knew anything about witchcraft, that witchcraft existed as a practice, So, it was a very instinctive thing, I think, that I was very naturally drawn to as a child.
Very good.
And, it was
So,
just the way it happened.
ladies and gentlemen, we're talking with Gemma Gary. Gemma is a British craft initiate and an occultist, a writer, an artist, an illustrator, and a trustee of the Friends of the Boscastle Museum of Witchcraft. You have written many works that explored witchcraft and folk magical traditions. Most of it actually focused upon the traditions as they are found in Devonshire and Cornwall.
Yes.
Now, we're going to talk. I mean, you have written a lot of books, but we're going to focus. Yes, but we're going to focus a little bit more in this book that you wrote, Traditional Witchcraft, a Cornish Book of Ways.
Yes.
And this is an amazing book, let me tell you. This is Traditional Witchcraft, a Cornish Book of Ways, Gemma Gary, by Troy Books. Now, I have to give a couple of things about Troy Books. There are 4 new authors coming up on the next 12 months to Troy Books. It's very, very exciting. Everything is very exciting in Troy Books always.
It's all happening at the time now.
Yes. Devil's Plantation by Nigel Persing is going to come up also. There's another book called The Black Dog Folklore, and it's all about ghosting appearances of black dogs all over the world by Mark Norman. After The Devil's Plantation, that comes up also. So very, very exciting news.
It is indeed, yes. It's enough to keep us busy, I think.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So tell me, what was the real? I mean, we're talking about the Traditional Witchcraft, a Cornish Book of Ways. You made the illustrations of this book. The photos are by the fantastic Jane Cox.
Oh yes,
and yes, and we have a first edition in 2008, October precisely, and second revised edition in 2011 in November, and then we have a reprint on 2012 and 13. Now, what was the idea behind? What prompted you to write this book?
Oh gosh, well the ideas behind the book were really around a long time before I actually got round to writing anything. It was really born from various different things, starting of course with my own practice. This was long before I was involved with magical groups or anything. My solitary practice was one in which I was very interested in linking it in to the local law and the magical traditions of Cornwall. And so there was obviously a wealth of different informations I could draw upon. Most popularly, of course, there's the collections of Robert Hunt and William Bottrell, who in the 19th century collected a lot of lore from witches, wise folk, and also the people who had interacted with these people, and also the folklore, a lot of stories about these people. And so there was a lot of material there for me to draw upon, and I saw these as things that I'd like to try and put into practice in some way and to adapt them for modern day practice. And the second influence really was what's known in the UK as modern traditional witchcraft, because although in the folk collectors material it's all operative magic,
yes,
what was really missing for me was the ritual side of things. I enjoy operative magic, but I also like very much and enjoy ritual. So a ritual structure was needed, and at the time I was friends with witches in East Anglia who were very involved with the Robert Cochrane style of witchcraft, which in Britain is one of the the movements within traditional witchcraft. And so that really fitted nicely to provide the structured ritual content, because in Cornwall you have things like conjuring staves and circumambulation around holy wells and stones and what have you for magic. And those things obviously are found in Robert Cochrane's tradition of witchcraft, and also working with the spirit world as well. So these things tallied very nicely together indeed. If you just heard a flappy noise, that wasn't me, that was the dog.
That's okay.
Yes.
That's fine. Now, you do say that following the first availability of the book, it became clear that the interest of this in contemporary path of Cornish traditional witchcraft was larger.
Yes.
And you know, the response to this, so this is the next question. How was the response to this? Of course, it was like probably overwhelming.
It was very bizarre, yes. When I first decided to write a book, it was really with the intention of just getting it printed and peddling it around locally through a few shops, just to drum up some interest locally, because there is a pagan community in Cornwall, but what I found lacking was an interest in the Cornish methods of magic and Cornish tradition and folklore and what have you. And so the idea was to put these little booklets around and what have you and see what came of it. And of course Jane had, she's a multi-talented person. She's she decided, why don't we do it ourselves, just print and produce the books. And put these online, and before we knew it, we were having orders coming in from all over the world, and hardly any selling in Cornwall. I mean, a few have sold in Cornwall, but we had Jerusalem, Alabama, and goodness knows all over the place, really.
Wow.
Yes, it was.
Now, tell me one thing. Now, how is this possible? We're talking about a tradition or practices that are very much imbued into the landscape, and we're going to talk about this later. And they're very much into the land, and it's the knowledge of the land. I mean, the whole practice is is embedded into this landscape geographically. How is it possible to do this in Jerusalem or in Poland, or you know what I mean, or in Alabama?
Yes.
I mean, how is it possible?
Well, I don't know. I mean, people seem to make it work for them. Perhaps they are attracted to the particular flavour of the style of witchcraft, and they adapt it for their own purposes in their own landscape, because each landscape obviously has its own lore and magical traditions, and perhaps they use that as a basis to build on their own traditions, what have you.
I think it's a matter of methods.
Yes,
for instance, the walking in the landscape, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. That can be done anywhere.
Yes,
to search for that, that energy, that, we call it ley line now, but it's really not, but, So, and I think that those are the things that people are looking for, the template that they can then build on their own landscape, on their own land, feel the land, and try to extract the memories and, and the procedures. So that's very interesting.
Yes.
Yeah. So, you say that also this is something that it was nothing. Cornish witchcraft tradition was not really nothing set in stone. It was
No, this is it. There was never a set in stone tradition of organised Cornish witchcraft. This never existed before. You had magical practitioners, and they perhaps each had their own individual ways. You have established methods of Cornish magic and working charms. You have traditions associated with some of the ancient sites. For example, the Montell stones, that's the hold stone, and it looks like a giant polo mint in the ground, and that has healing traditions and divinatory traditions. We have holy wells with magical traditions, but an organised ritual cult of witchcraft, that isn't something that we found in Cornwall at all.
So it was an individualistic practice.
Yes, very much so. What we have in the book here is very ritualistic, but again, it doesn't claim to be a historical tradition of Cornish witchcraft. It is very much something that's been put together from my own practice, which drew upon magical practices in Cornwall, and from other witches I encountered in Cornwall working in the present day. So, it's very much a modern tradition of craft, perhaps developed amongst a few people, that draws upon the past but isn't claiming to be historical in any way.
Inspired, right?
Inspired, yes.
Yes.
Drawing upon the past but making it workable for today.
Yes,
Definitely.
yeah. Now, this book, as well as many other things that you do locally, are part of an intent that you have previously, you and some other people, to awaken the awareness and a revival of some of the traditions that were lost in the, in local traditions of the year of the Cornish seasonal festivities, and especially in Penwith, which is where now. What kind of festivities are these, and is everywhere welcome? Everyone is welcome to these.
Oh, indeed, yes. The real catalyst behind this is a man called Simon Reed, who wrote a book for us called The Traditional Cornish Year. And he's been instrumental in reviving a lot of local traditions here in the Penzance area. And we have really a seasonal, almost a wheel, to use the modern pagan idea of the wheel of the year. But we have May horns in May, which involves people processing through from Newlyn into Penzance. And we basically blow horns and whistles and make a colossal racket.
It sounds like fun.
Yes, scaring away the last lingering spirits of winter and what have you. And an old tradition that was involved in May horns in the past was making whistles out of sycamore twigs and what have you. And you had the old May horns, the big tin and copper horns. So it's a good excuse to dress up and make a racket.
Absolutely. It's great. So now let's move to historical figures. One of those that, and you talk about this in the book a lot, not a lot, but you have the introduction and then you have a couple of them, and you do have some photographs. Now, by the way, photographs of our beloved Jane are so beautiful and well done, and they're all black and white, very artistic, and of course it wouldn't work if the model was not very good. So you are. So
she's
now
a clever stick.
Oh, she is. Now, tell us about Granny Boswell.
Yes, she was one of Helston's most famous witches. Of course, there were many witches and cunning folk and wise folk in Cornish tradition, but I suppose Granny Boswell and Tammy Billy are the ones who turn up or are most written about. And she was of Romany origin, and she married a Romany, and she practiced magic mainly for young women who wanted to ask questions about their future lovers or future husbands and what have you. She made little charms for people, grisly charms, including spiders in bags to hang around your neck and what have you. It's all good. Now, Cornish stuff.
now, tell me one thing. I know that most of these things come out of William Bottrell and all of those historians and chronicle, people at the time that actually, collected these things. Now, is it possible to draw from their accounts anything, or at least be inspired to apply to Cornish witchcraft today?
Oh yes, I think that's always possible. If Bottrell and Hunt were collecting in the mid-1850s, in the mid-1800s, and they collected so many stories and accounts, and I'm of the opinion that there's always something of use in there that you can draw upon. So yes, definitely. I don't like to see these things as just relics of the past to be looked at and left alone. There's always things of use
Oh yes, absolutely.
and
Yeah,
dig up.
yeah. Now, talking about magic and all of the practices, the needs or the requests from the magical practitioners, so that people would ask them, still today are the same that they were. Yeah, I don't know.
Oh
In the
yes,
past, do we
definitely.
still ask for love, money, health, and roof over our heads? Or
Oh, definitely. Yes, I used to work as a magical practitioner for clients. I sadly don't get to do that much these days because I'm more involved with obviously the books and what have you.
yes.
But yeah, certainly the queries that were put to me were for people seeking charms to keep their relationship together or to encourage a new lover. So yes, love always came at the top of all the requests from clients. Then also, I think the second one was people who suspect they were cursed or having, a run of very bad luck and what have you. So they wanted that to be, exorcised or lifted from them. So yeah, I'd say love and seeking the lifting of a curse were the two main ones that always came up over and over again.
Now, Mark is very, very. He's participating in the chat room. I'm just seeing.
Oh, yes, I
And
have
he
a
said,
message from him
yes.
earlier.
Yeah. And he says, it might be interesting to ask Gemma to talk about the differences between the Cornish ways and those in Devon, as she is currently writing about Devon witchcraft.
That's an interesting one.
Thank you, Mark.
Yes, well, my current Devon Witchcraft book is still very much a pile of very scattered and unorganised notes, so it will manifest into a book one day. But I think, really there are a lot of similarities between Devon and Cornwall because they are neighbours after all, so a flow between the two is natural, really. Devon Witchcraft, you find perhaps a lot more of the shape-shifting stories of witches and toads being used an awful lot more, animal hearts being stuck with pins and hung in chimneys, yeah, mainly among the farming communities. A lot of the old stories of white witches being brought in to counter curses revolve around farming communities. Obviously because all the problems they might encounter with cattle dying or being ill and suspecting a witch and what have you. And there's also accounts of white witches, the White Witch of Exeter and what have you, being consulted by people. So perhaps there are more stories, I think, from Devon than there are from Cornwall. A lot of the Cornish stories are perhaps more in the realm of folklore, whereas a lot of the ones from Devon, I think, are more historical stories of things that actually happened. But of course folklore as well can be, there's no smoke without fire. I think in folklore there are underlining truths that actually went on. But yes, writing the Devon book is going to be an interesting thing. I'm looking forward to seeing the differences myself. So.
Oh yes, and we are too.
Yeah.
Now, money was always something that you talk about, money and exchange of money and all of that. Was there anything else that witches at the time would accept, and still today, in exchange for a curse lifting or something like that?
Well, yes, a lot of Cornish witches seem to have been, in it as a profession, and money indeed would change hands. Sometimes, historically, you see quite a lot of, quite a high sum of money, which for the people at the time, with their low incomes, would have been quite a hefty payment, which is testament to the belief they had in the abilities of these people. But, certainly witches might ask for, eggs or milk or supplies in order, to keep curses off the farm or what have you, kind of a protection racket. The witch mafia of Cornwall.
Yes. And there's all well, it's the art of cunning, isn't it? I mean,
It is.
in every single
Yes.
way,
It
Now,
is.
curse lifting.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the things that really fascinates me. I really do like, as a friend of mine says, a bloody good curse, and just because of the architecture of it, I really think that curses are so much more interesting, and curse lifting so much more interesting than anything else. Um, in the spectrum of everything, uh, it's still today. Do we practice this? I mean, are people who come to the practitioners today asking for curse lifting, and did the causes of the curse lifting actually change it from ancient times, or from the past to now? I mean, was it always envy, or was it always, some kind of hatred, or what was it that drives it, that you found out that was the cause of this?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's an interesting difference between the clients that come for curse lifting today and the ones you read about in the past.
Mm-hmm.
The past clients tended to want to know who the curser was, and the witch or peller might perform a divination to show them who the person was who had placed a curse on them, and then
Yes.
act accordingly.
Yes.
Today, for some reason, people aren't so interested in finding out who the person is. They just come to you and say, I am cursed, this is happening to me, I'm experiencing these runs of bad luck, can you lift this curse for me?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that is an interesting difference between the two.
Very interesting. So they
Mm.
don't want to know who it is. They just want
Just
to
get rid of it.
yeah,
Yeah.
just get rid of it. Yeah, yeah. Um, and this is well, again, money and all of that. Now, cunning folk, charmers, white witches, conjurers, pellars.
Hmm.
What are the differences here?
Well, the folk collectors seem to like to pigeonhole people neatly into little boxes, but
Yes.
I think reading through the stories, these people really overlapped quite a lot in what they did. I mean, a white witch is, of course, a misnomer because they were also entirely capable of cursing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, other writers in the West Country have written of grey witches or double ways witches.
Oh, I see. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Charmers tend to be people who work with healing, blood stopping,
Mm-hmm.
wart charming, bone setting, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
A wise woman or a peller, they might be more all-rounders, priding charms, what have you, divinations,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think there's any real clear-cut, defined differences
I
between
think
these.
it's depending on what they're doing, right? I mean,
Yes,
a white witch can be doing a divination, as well as the peller can be doing, a charm. I mean, it's just not, it's interchangeable, isn't it?
yes,
At
definitely.
some
Because
point,
each
yeah.
have their own particular strengths and
Mm,
skills.
mm,
Yeah.
mm. Now, you said that we don't really find, I mean, this word coven, right?
Mm.
And, organized group of people who actually are doing things, and, you already said that we can't find that. We can't really find that in Cornwall, and or in the Cornish witchcraft. Now, it
Mm.
is very much solitary. Maybe, and you pointed out this in the book, there were groups. Maybe it was very rare because, transportation, money, all of those things came into
Oh,
account,
yes. Yeah.
and the ways were not really very, Um, but do we have it today?
Indeed, we do. Yes.
Mm.
I mean, yes. In the past, it would be very difficult with
Yeah.
people's busy lives, lack of transportation, what have you, to gather together. It's not to say it didn't happen. We just don't know about it.
Mm-hmm,
I don't
mm-hmm.
know because I wasn't there. But but,
Yes.
yeah, certainly today times have changed. We do have disposable incomes. We have time. We have transport, and practitioners do gather together. Definitely.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now let's go a little bit deeper onto the
Mm-hmm.
book. Let's talk about the red serpent.
Ooh,
Uh,
yes.
what is the red serpent, and why is it so important for the practitioner?
Well, it's found in Roman beliefs. It's perhaps found worldwide. the idea of the telluric fire in the earth. The earth spirit is often depicted as a serpent, and this ties in with the fallen fire from the heavens, the old ones depicted as of the serpent blood, and the forefathers of witch blood and what have you. And so the serpent in witchcraft, in particularly modern Cornish witchcraft, amongst the practitioners I've worked with and in my own work, the serpent is that force, that animating life force within the land that empowers life, but also can be drawn upon to empower magic and what have you. So yes, it is that fire in the land and in ourselves, definitely.
What happens to the serpent at the new moon?
Oh, well. Well, all things have their tides, their ebbs and flows. The moon governs the seas, its tidal cycles, and the earth responds accordingly. You have, the serpent at the growing and the full moon can be a generative force, and at the waning and dark of the moon it can be a consumptive force, and of course something that consumes can be a dangerous thing to work with, if you're not that guarded. You don't want to be consumed yourself or drained by it. So yes,
very interesting.
It's all those cycles, ebbs and flows.
Now, another thing that you talk about is the mystery of becoming. Right? What is this, the mystery of becoming?
Oh gosh, that's a difficult one to explain.
As you say in the book, it's very difficult to actually write this.
Yes, it's something, obviously, as you know, there's many things you can feel and understand innately in yourself, but to put them into words is another thing.
It's very difficult.
But I suppose to really simplify it, the act of becoming is realizing your connection to all around you. The earth below, the sky above, the winds of spirit, the fires of the heavens, the fires in the land, the telluric fire, the ancestral voices in the waters of the earth. These are all things that you draw upon, and it creates a wholeness and a magical sense of connection to all. And there's the old cunning idea that all is one, all is connected. And that's a very good starting point for magic, because if you're realizing your connection to all, then you can work with your target, the target of your magic, because you're connected to it. Yeah.
Now, there's a whole lot of, this book is so rich that I can't we can't just kind of go through it all. But there's a whole lot of things. I'm going to just go and kind of like glance through. There's the Witch's Compass, which is, we're going to talk a little bit about that if we, and the book also, because it's on one of the things that you contributed to several works for this, or with this. The trade, which is another thing. The trade is basically where you actually put all of the things, the charms, the workings of protection, the workings of healing, and all of that all of the operative magic. But there is one, and I'm particularly interested in this because it's actually where the name Troy books come from. It's the Troy stone. And how does one use a Troy stone, and why?
Well, you have on the Troy stone, which is basically a flat slab of stone, usually slate, because it's very easy to carve into and not that heavy to use, and you have a unicircular labyrinth. And this isn't a labyrinth you can get lost in, there's not twists and turns that take you in different ways. It's one way in to the centre and one way out. So really it's a meditative tool, it's a trance-inducing tool, and a magical tool. You're descending into the labyrinth, round and round to the centre. As you go, you're turning clockwise and then anti-clockwise, so it's creating that balance, and then you arrive at the centre, and then of course you work your way out again, clockwise, anti-clockwise, and out of the labyrinth. So it's it can be a work of creation. You go into the labyrinth, you get rid of something, you leave it there, as you're working your way out of the labyrinth, that could be a generative work, and you come out of the labyrinth with that which you desire, a new magical goal, as it were.
It's a wonderful, wonderful tool, isn't it?
Yes.
Full
but
of
mainly a meditative tool. It's very, very useful for inducing light trance states, particularly before divination work. I use it a lot for that.
Now, we have to jump, Gemma.
Oh, good.
we can't really. Who is Buka or Buki?
The Buka.
Yeah, the Buka. Or Buka. I said Buka, did I? Buka.
You did.
Buka.
You can say Buka if you want.
Go ahead.
It's a very mysterious deity that, for me, it's a deity. In Cornish lore, it seems to have been degraded towards a goblin status or a naughty spirit, whereas there are ideas that before it was actually some form of deity that has been degraded, because you find parallels with Buka and Puck and Boo in different cultures, and these quite often relate to a goat form deity or a goat spirit. And the Buka and this is something I encountered when I first became interested in Cornish folklore, and researching it, the Buka came up and for some reason grabbed my attention and became a focus for my work. But also when I first became involved with covens and other witches operating in West Cornwall, the Buka kept coming up again and again. It seemed to be a focus not only for my work but for their work as well. So it seems to be a deity that personifies that rift or split in the veil between the worlds, a personification of mystery and of magic, associated with the sea and with storms that come in from the sea across the land. And it is also a chthonic spirit as well, because farmers would leave mouthfuls of ale as offering to the Buka in the land. So,
I would never say it Buka again after I heard that. Now this is a question for you: Gwither, or do?
Or don't? Why not all?
Now we have to define this.
Oh yes. Well, Buka is, for those that work with Buka today, it seems to be very much the idea that Buka is a dualistic spirit, because you have Buka Du, who is the black Buka, more associated with storms and perhaps the folkloric devil, as distinct from the church devil. It's a very different thing. And the chaotic forces of nature. And you have Buka Gwydden, the white Buka, the benevolent Buka, if you like. So it's, they're two sides of the one thing, the light and the dark. So in Buka, you have a deity of balance and of union, and perhaps for me the light betwixt the horns is a very good symbol of the union of that balance, the two horns representing the two, the light and the dark, and then that mystic fire in between, which is the union of the two. So mystic very deep mystic things to meditate on there.
Yes. This is, we just we still have time to talk about all of this. Now let's jump again to tools. I'm so sorry to the listeners, because we could be here like 3 hours, and of course poor Gemma would just be talking forever. Now tools, beyond the natural tools of wisdom, force of the serpent that we know, that and the waters and the wind and all of that, what other tools are there to help us in the cunning arts?
Of the physical tools, of course, we've covered the Troy stone, the labyrinth stone.
Yes.
There are staves or sticks that are used. Again, a lot of the physical tools that are used in the book are very much inspired by a lot of the things in Cecil Williamson's collection in the Museum of Witchcraft. Because he put together this amazing collection of items that drew upon the work of West Country wise women and cunning folk and witches. And these, again, are all things I was fascinated in. You go into the museum, and these are all things that you just don't see anywhere else. You don't read about them anywhere else. They're all very unique items that I thought, wow, let's try some of these things and put them into use. And you have things like the talking stick, where Cecil advises burying one end of the stick into the ground, and you have the forks of the stick. So it's very much like the stang of modern traditional witchcraft. But the two forks press against your eyes, and you feel for the pulse, the energy pulse of the land, and the spirit voices of the land, and what have you. So it's a communal tool for communing with the land and the spirits of the land. You do find knives and things, as you find in other aspects of the craft, although these knives tend to be sharp rather than blunt knives that you find in other craft traditions, which to me makes sense because the nature of the tool, it's a cutting tool. Having a blunt knife is like having a chalice with a hole in it. It won't hold anything. A blunt knife won't cut anything. But yes, certainly there are a wealth of tools there to be found in the book. And again, a lot of these are inspired by the collections of Cecil Williamson.
Now, what is the role of the Peller staff within the circle? Because we talked about a whole lot of tools, but there is the Peller staff is often commented, and it comes over and over again. What is the role of the Peller staff?
Well, again, you find this in a lot of the old stories of Cornish witches, of them using staves to conjure spirits forth. So it's a conjuring tool. It's a big wand, really. It's also very much akin to the stang. It can represent the horned one, the altar, the rend, the portal between this world and the next. And of course you can have different staves. You can have the ash staff, which is very good for working with the world beyond, the spirits. You have hazel staffs, very good for divination, and of course the dreaded blackthorn staff for dealing with naughty people and doing a bit of blasting. So the Peller's staff, or the Cornish witch's staff, today is very different to the stang that perhaps you might find in say the Cochrane tradition of witchcraft, where it is simply the altar. Well, not simply the altar, it's obviously a profound item, but it is also a hand tool, a working tool.
Now, we talked about the tools. Now, there is the witch's compass, which is basically the compass is basically the circle, or that hollow, space that is created by the pillars. Now, they do. Does the compass works always the same way? I mean, does the pillar work the compass always the same way? Because the reference that we have is Wicca, of course, and that that everything is always the same, and you do exactly the same way. You do it clockwise, etc., etc. Is it possible to do it any other way in this? I mean, how does the pillar does it and works it?
I can only speak for my own practice there, and those I work with, and certainly we do work clockwise when we need to for generative rituals, seasonal rituals for the growing half of the year. These are very much clockwise or with the sun rituals, rituals that are with the waning moon and the dark of the moon and the waning tide of the year. We do work against the sun or anti-clockwise in our conjuration of the circle. So yes, both ways are entirely possible.
So much more diverse. Now, what is the
fun to be different sometimes?
Yes, yeah. What is the walking the round?
Oh, the walking of the round is very much like the treading the mill again that you find in Cochranian influenced craft, sabbatic craft, and what have you. It's something again that I encountered with my friends in East Anglia who wrote to me about Alexander craft. I actually know how Alexander's did do it. There's lots of footage of the Sanders coven. They are circling around the fire, and this is something I encountered when I first became involved with a traditional coven in Cornwall, and it's a meditative technique. It's a technique of conjuration, of invocation, and in my coven rites we always first circle against the sun or anti-clockwise, which is a gathering in. It's a gathering in of the virtues of the spirits of the quarters and of the deity that we're working with. It could be quite a long, grueling process, where you're intensely focusing upon the deity or the spirit or the virtue that you're calling upon for that particular working. And that doesn't stop until either somebody collapses or there's phenomena which indicates that that presence is there. And then of course you have other rounds or mills which are with the sun, and these are more energetic, and these are for raising those powers that have been called in, those influences and virtues. So you have an anti-clockwise gathering in, a stirring in, and then a clockwise raising and intensifying, and then sending it out to do its work.
Now, one of the things that really impressed me on the book is that you do talk about the role of the elderly or the infirm, which is something that normally it's really not talked about. You don't really care, but you do, and you do say, they do have a role in this compass, in the ritual itself, and what do they do, the elderly and the infirm?
Well, there's always the option.
They're not set aside, right? They're not set aside.
No, not,
yes.
Go and sit in the corner and be quiet. No, it's there's always the option for those who don't feel they are up to the walking of the round to sit at the edge of the circle and to drum, because you can keep up the pace of the circle by drumming. Drumming is in itself is a repetitive meditative act, so you can get out of that the same things you would get out of actually participating in the round. So there's that. There's also the use of the Bullroarer or windroarer, which again is another repetitive task, a turning, a spinning. So these very much things that people can do who perhaps don't have the stamina to walk around and around and around and around in these intensive circles, but can still participate in in the task.
Now let's talk about the trade. Treefoot law. It's one of the things that we know over and over again was hammered to our heads, either in the neo-pagan community or the pagan community, or anything that you can see, Wicca, whatever what have you. They always talk about the treefoot law, and they always talk about this thing that you can. Is there a treefoot law in the pellars craft or not?
Well, historically, the pellars and white witches, again that old misnomer, white witches, they were very capable of blessing and cursing, and they did it. Cecil Williamson, a modern day cunning man, he was not adverse to doing some cursing if he felt somebody was needing it. So no, you really don't find that within historical Cornish craft, and from my experience, modern day practitioners who have that that leaning towards that style of craft, they're not adverse to cursing when it's needed, but it's very much a last resort kind of thing. I suppose there is something akin to the threefold law, because to be engaged in such work isn't, it's not a pleasant way to spend your time or your energies. It's a draining thing. So I believe if you are engaging in that work, there is a hefty cost to it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, the rites of exorcism. You talk about this also, and you have a rite of exorcism to get rid of spirits from the place. Now, I really quite didn't have the idea that this was something that was done. But you do say, well, yes, there is a rite of exorcism to get rid of spirits. Now, how does this process happen? I mean, each person has, or each pillar has, or each practitioner has their own way of doing the rite of exorcism, or it's pretty much they know certain things that have to be followed, and for instance, where to send the spirits, or something like that. So, is there a commonality about it, or is it pretty much individualistic?
Well, I suppose at its core, there's the common goal of the working. But yes, I suppose different practitioners certainly have their own approach. The approach I wrote about was very much inspired by a Devonian current-day cunning man, Jackdaw. He wrote a very good rite of exorcism using the poppet. So my ritual was very much inspired by his work. Again, I would say it's very much a last resort practice. I'm much more for the idea of working with spirit houses. If there's a troublesome spirit in a house, it's very possible to create a spirit house, a space just for that spirit. And if you do that, a troublesome spirit can become a spiritual asset in the home. If you provide them with a space that they're happy with, their troublesome behaviour could cease, and they've got a space they're happy with that keeps them happy and entertained. So exorcism, I think, should be a very, very completely last resort thing for something absolutely drastic and horrible. But in most cases, we live alongside the spirit world. We live in homes sometimes where there are spirit presences, and they're part of the home. They shouldn't always be gotten rid of automatically.
Well, but this is the instinct of people. They always sort of like bleach everything. It's just like get rid of everything. Just don't care about the spirits or what. Yeah. Now, how does one call down the moon? I mean, this name is pretty much resonant with modern day Wiccans, and it sounds like something familiar, right? How does one call down the moon in Cornish witchcraft?
In my practice, it's a combination of Cecil Williamson. Again, Cecil had a very good ritual he wrote about where you use a reflection of the moon in the sea, and sitting on the top of a cliff at the full moon, looking out at the sea, the moon creates a beautiful path of silver light towards you. And he would look up to the moon, or those who practice this ritual would look up to the moon, down to the sea, up to the moon, down to the sea, and eventually the orb of the moon would be seen to travel down and along this path and up to the person. And this could be for spirit communication or an act of divination. You also find acts of drawing down the moon in other modern traditional witchcraft streams, where mirrors are used to reflect the moon into the wine that's being drunk in the ritual, or into a vessel of water, again for divinatory purposes, and in the case of the wine, to partake of the spirit of the moon and the forces of the moon.
Now, this is a very interesting. I mean, I can't. I have so many questions. You don't know. I mean, this book is. You go into. I mean, we couldn't. We can't. We have 10 minutes though. But we can't. Yes, I know. About the the festivals and all of that. So let's talk a little bit about the festivals and just. But before we go there, and I know that you have a chapter here which is very, very beautiful. It's called Initiations. anyone that it's anyone, right? Today they think that they have, and because of the previous, the previous history of the modern witchcraft movement, they always think that they have to be initiated, and if they want to be part of something, or to be acknowledged as someone in that particular, is this important?
Well, it can certainly be very valuable to be, acknowledged and initiated within a group or a tradition. I don't think it's the initiator who bestows the initiation. It's the spirits, the egregore of the group, the deity that's involved. But again, this is something that can be done on a solitary basis. A lot of the traditional historical rites of initiation seem to have been solitary. You have the old churchyard rituals involving toads and what have you. But these were solitary rites, pacts with the old one and what have you. But I think initiation, it is an acknowledgement of your entering into a working relationship with the spirit world, a walking away from the the normal mundane way of living onto a path of return, a path back to the wild, and to the otherness, the strangeness, a path of power and what have you. So initiation is really, it's the initial steps, the decision to cross that threshold, and that can be done alone, it can be done with a group.
Now, from the traditional festivals, which one is your favourite?
Oh, I love Montell.
Can you tell us a little bit shortly, but can you tell us a little bit about it and why do you like it?
Again, this is another Penzance tradition that was revived by Simon Reed, and it has become this wonderful festival where the people in the community just throw themselves into creating the most wonderful costumes. Geezing is the core tradition of Montell, where people disguise themselves with masks and tatters, which strips of torn fabric all over their clothing, and it's just an astonishing visual cacophony of wonderful sights and sounds, because there's musicians parading through the streets, strange masked beasts, osses, giant green men. We have a giant crow called Old Ned, and I've been leaping around at last Montell in an oss with a mare's skull. And there's at the end there's a fire, and somebody's selected to do what's called chalking the mock, where a chalk figure is inscribed on a piece of ash wood, and that's thrown into the fire to encourage the sun to return, what have you, so that we have a good waxing year to come.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Gemma Gary, the author of Traditional Witchcraft, A Cornish Book of Ways. The Montell ritual is actually here. Just in case that you were, worrying that only, the words of Gemma. No, it's right here. There's an explanation of it, and then an introduction, and then there is a Montell ritual. Yeah, so it's you can get it in the book. For those of you who do not know where to get it or where to go to get this this particular book, you can go to troybooks.co.uk. Now, Gemma, new works, new books coming out. We talked a little bit about it. I mean, you have one that it's the Wished Waters, which is very good, Aquis Magica and the Cult of the Holy Wells. And that's a very good one also. It's Three Hands Press. Charmer Salmer, it's another one which is very, very good, and this is like a compilation of a couple of things that that you got, not all psalms, but other things. The Black Toad, which we will West Country Witchcraft and Magic, we're coming again with you talking about this. So stay tuned. And then you did a whole lot of numerous contributions on many books. One of them is Hands of a Hypothesis, and it's edited by Michael Howard and Daniel Schockel. So now, if you want to get this book from Gemma Gary, the best bet for you, I mean, you can go anywhere. Gemma, your website is gemmagary.co.uk, so it's
Yes.
.co, you say .co, www.gemmagary.co.uk. And if you want to buy the book, you can buy it from there, but you can also buy it from Troy Books directly, and that's troybooks.co.uk. Now, we have to tell this to people. Do you really want to be on top of everything that's coming out on Troy Books? You have to follow them on Twitter, and this is the Twitter. It's at Troy Books. Very, very simple, at Troy Books, and then you're all set for for the latest news.
Yes.
Right?
That's well up to date. Yes.
Yes. So thank you so much for being on
Thank you.
on the black chair. You know,
Oh, yes.
I'm just, I don't know if it is a black chair that you're sitting on, but
It is indeed a black chair. Yes.
and
Steve was sat in the same chair. He thought it was
Yes.
grey, but it's actually dusty. It's black underneath.
see, it was a pleasure to have you on the black chair.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and we'll have you again on other titles that you've written and you're authored also,
Oh,
to
yes,
talk
it'd
a
be a
little bit
pleasure.
more about Cornish witchcraft and magic and all
Yes.
of these passions that we share.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for everyone in the chat room for being here. Wonderful audience. We had 35 people listening to this
Huh? Go.
live. Thank you so much. We will be certainly back on another one with Gemma again, talking more about magic. Gemma, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.